What is up, everybody? Welcome into this Saturday episode of Flippin Bats, Saturday with Smoltz, where every single Saturday the Hall of Famer joins me here, and this one's going to be a lot of fun because earlier this week on Wednesday, if you haven't listened yet, another Hall of Famer from the Atlanta Braves, Tom Glavine, joined me, and we talked so many stories about Bobby Cox and Deion Sanders and Greg Maddux and those Braves teams and this current Braves team. It was great. But of course, knowing I have John on every week, had to ask him some stories about John Smoltz. And we're going to play it back in this episode. So right at the beginning, I'm going to tell John that I had him on and play one of the stories that Tom Glavine was talking about. And we're also going to talk about Deion Sanders and what he's doing at Colorado with that football team there. And if it at all surprises John, Shohei Ohtani, is he still the MVP? In John's opinion, is he still the MVP despite not really going to be playing at all in the last month of the season? And finishing up with the comments that John made about Spencer Strider in the booth this past week, saying, and I quote, "So he's so far ahead of any of us that's ever pitched in a Braves uniform." Pretty strong words. Going to talk about that. But this one's going to be a lot of fun. Without further ado, let's welcome in now Hall of Famer John Smoltz.
Fly ball onto the track, at the wall, it's gone! Home run!
Turns on a ball, deep right field, and gone!
What a game, what a moment. All right, and pumped to welcome him in now, as I do every single week, the Hall of Famer, John Smoltz. John, how are we doing this week?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me again.
Of course, it's been a fun week here on Flippin' Bats because earlier this week I had on Tom Glavine, obviously teammate of yours, talked a lot of stories, talked a lot about current baseball. But one thing I had to ask was about a story that comes to mind when he thinks about John Smoltz. And John, I want to play you his answer here.
Oh man, there's Smoltz is just high energy, right? I mean, he's a 12-year-old kid trapped now in a 50-year-old man's body. So that's just how he is. That's how he's wired. And it's nonstop. All the time. The kind of guy that if you went on a long weekend vacation with him, you'd be worn out by the end of the weekend. There's no question about it because there's no downtime. But there obviously, look, I saw him one time on a bus in New York. He had that little black book with all the golf courses and connections and whatever in there. And he couldn't find it. He lost it on the bus, and you'd have thought that his 1-year-old child had disappeared. I mean, it was the panic was just off the charts. I've seen, you see things between him and Maddux, that happened all the time. One of Greg's favorite things was whenever John would be driving a rental car, if we were coming back from the golf course, particularly in New York City, stopped at a red light, he'd wait for the crosswalk to be maximum fullness and honk on the horn so that everybody's looking at John. John's beat red, embarrassed, and pissed off, and all the above. So it was just a fun dynamic. I mean, John never did anything too stupid, other than which he denies when he tried to iron his shirt when he had it on and burned himself. But other than that, it was just goofy fun.
Just great talking so many stories with him about everything. But anything jump out there? He claims the ironing the shirt story is true. He says you don't like to admit it, but it is. I don't know.
No, that's an easy one to keep. He's trying to keep that alive. That is by far the greatest lie in sports injury history. I remember going on every talk show. And when that thing came out, it was a unfortunate scenario that the beat writer of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution thought he overheard something, printed the story, and you know how those go. The retractions never get any attraction, right? And so, yeah, I should have ran with that a long time ago. I should have gotten like some kind of dry cleaning or iron deal, but I was so mad and so defiant that I never let that truth stay out there. But of course it has, because nobody likes a good story that isn't true.
Well, of course it has as well, because Tom won't let it die. He mentioned multiple times in the conversation that that it was true. He really wanted to drive that point across. He also added, John, that the Nike commercial that obviously is a part of and one of the most famous commercials, baseball commercials of all time. He said at the time you were very mad that you didn't get to be a part of it, and that you're still upset that it was them two and not you.
Oh yeah, I mean, there couldn't have been a better power pitching hitter. Those guys were slap hitters, right? But it was a brilliant commercial. I give them that. The acting was off the charts. Don't know how long it took them to actually do it, but I wasn't a Nike guy. It's the only reason I wasn't part of it, because I wasn't a Nike guy.
Do you have, if I were to ask you one story that comes to mind of Tom Glavine? I know there's a million and probably a million that you can't share, but what's one that comes to mind of Tom Glavine?
You know, the one thing about Tommy, when we did the broadcast, we were trying to find something he did wrong in his career, some goof, he's a boring, just get it done pitcher. And he was a boring, just get it done guy. The only thing that I can think about, he got mad at me, didn't talk to me for a week. And I kind of got it afterwards. We were trying to have fun with him. And so Glav, along with myself, we pitched, and Maddox, but primarily Glavine pitched hurt a lot. And that's what we did. And he hadn't been out to the field. We sat next to each other all the time. He hadn't been out to the field in a while, but I knew he was pitching through some cracked ribs and trying to win a Cy Young and trying to make every start. So just to be lighthearted, I made arrows of tape all the way from his locker to the spot where he used to sit. But of course, he was during the game getting treatment and trying to do, it was just an inside funny joke. Well, he got so mad at me, he thought that the media might pick up on it. He didn't talk to me for a week, but that was the only thing that we crossed paths that didn't exactly jive. I thought it was funny. People make those tape, like when someone runs into a wall, they make the tape of the person on it. I was just drawing lines and arrows and had a big X where he used to sit. But no, he's pretty boring. Just get it done. And that's just the way he was. We couldn't even find a mishap or a goof or anything that he did in his career. It's amazing.
One of your other former teammates, John, has become probably the most talked about guy in all of sports right now. Deion Sanders, for what he's doing in Colorado with that football team. Has it surprised you at all what Deion Sanders has been able to do in the coaching world, and specifically in his first year at a new stop in Colorado?
No, it really hasn't. He has all the intangibles, the experience, the motivation. Obviously, he's going to find out, he's not going to win all his games, and what he does to adjust and learn. I think he's learned all that, and he loves kids and he loves the heart of an athlete. So it's Deion being Deion. Look, they're going to lose some games. There's no doubt. But what he does to that program and how he builds it is going to be second to none. And I know a lot of people have a problem with how he did it, but Deion doesn't care about what other people think.
Not at all. There's not a single care given by Deion.
That's right. And that's what makes him special. I mean, you got to have thick skin. You got to believe in what you do. He's the greatest athlete I've ever been around. And people are going to not like some things that are different. But, the program brought him there for a reason. They've already put him on the map. That's for sure.
Yeah. John, in the American League, I want to talk American League MVP because in my opinion, it's wrapped up. But in your opinion, though he's out for the remainder of the year and what'll end up ultimately being about the last month of the year, he wasn't pitching, wasn't hitting for the majority of it as well with the oblique injury and now done for the year. Is Shohei Ohtani still the certain AL MVP?
I think so. I mean, he's going to bring some competitors closer to him, and there may be somebody who has a historic 2 weeks. We'll see. But I think he's done enough. And certainly, people are going to complain about this being the Shohei Ohtani Award. Well, next year will be challenging because he won't be able to do the thing that makes him unique. And so maybe next year it strictly will be the offensive category if he does enough to have a three-peat. But I think he's definitely the MVP, and the quantity and the quality of which he put together is second to none. And it's just, it's just the nature of the beast. He's the greatest athlete in our sport that's doing something we've never seen before.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I also, last week we discussed you're actually getting ready to head to the broadcast booth to do the Braves game that night. And You ended up talking about Spencer Strider and said that he's so far ahead of any of us that have ever pitched in a Braves uniform. I'd love to discuss that and hear what made you say that.
Well, his stuff and his ability to pitch with the kind of stuff that we marvel at is second to none. I mean, there's no way we would even be picked. If there's a lineup of the Braves talented starters today, we'd be picked in the back. I mean, because of stuff alone. The obviously identity of a pitcher is how long can you keep it up and how long can you pitch. Now we were able to crack that code in our era, but I think the fact that he is just so dynamic and already has the ability to dominate a game, that's what makes him special. We never dominated. We found a way to have longevity and in our own way dominate over time, but never to the degree he's done. Now, here's some things he's got to learn that we had maybe a slower learning curve. It took me 3 or 4 years to say some of the things that he's been able to do. And once he learns them, I mean, he's got a chance to shatter every record that's ever been by an Atlanta Brave pitcher, and doesn't matter who it is. So that's what I meant by that comment.
John, I want to ask the question kind of on reverse. I think with your comments, we know how fondly you think of him and how highly you think of him. But as a Hall of Fame pitcher yourself and a guy that had all the longevity in the world, what would you say would be the contrast to that? What are your concerns with Spencer Strider?
Yeah, the biggest thing would be, does he learn to go to a side of the plate, or does he have his money pitch? When you have these false sense securities of information and your velocity overrides everything else and you can live in the strike zone, there's going to be a time when you can't. And that's what we all had to learn. How do you pitch without your best stuff? And his stuff is so good, you could fall into kind of a bad habit of just trusting it every single time. And we've seen games, and this is the adjustment I was talking about. We've seen games where he doesn't have the electric fastball that can get by hitters in the strike zone. He gets hit a little bit. He's going to learn how to pitch with that stuff and be able to win with it. And when he does, it's night and day. So I would like to see the evolution of pitchers stay healthy. You know, I've talked about that all the time.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? You have to have gears and be able to not max effort every single time. Now, he's a freak. His lower body is probably as strong as anybody. So maybe he is the outlier, and everyone's trying to be like him, which we know that's a difficult process for a lot of pitchers to do. So I just want to see him healthy. I'd love to see him break every record there is, because if he's breaking records, that means he's healthy.
So to the point you just made, if he doesn't have that electric fastball, one start that comes to mind was the broadcast that you were a part of with Glavine, Chipper, and Frank Core earlier in the year. So you're saying in a start like that, instead of just relying on your stuff that might not be as good as it usually is that game, that's a game that you're going to have to really dive in and figure out how to pitch and to use your stuff differently. And that would sort of be a big evolution for him in being a better pitcher.
No doubt. Because if you don't have a third or a side that you're dominant on and you can live in the strike zone, I think he has the highest percentage of pitches in the strike zone without damage. That's incredible. But then what happens when you get damaged and you don't have the ability to know how to get out of the strike zone and pitch to corners? That to me is the difference. And I think he'll learn that, no doubt. And given the opportunity, he'll dominate.
John, last one for you. I was watching the game the other night. You were up in the booth. I got to ask, what was that effort up there on the foul ball?
Oh, man, that brought back a lot of bad memories. You know, early in my broadcast, I wanted to catch a foul ball so bad that in Boston, 3-man booth, Brian Anderson kind of boxed me out of trying to get this ball that ricocheted, of course, and ended up in a place you don't want it to end up. And that moment in Philadelphia, I went for the ball realizing this has got a chance for the same thing. So I pulled back because this is the thing I had to manage in less than 2 seconds. That would have broke my hands. That ball was coming in at such a velocity. I want to play golf. I can broadcast without, a healthy hand, but I that ball right there had about an exit velocity going backwards at a level that I didn't want to mess with. So I used my wisdom in that case.
Probably pretty smart. You've been dealing long enough with not being able to be on the golf course. So anything that can keep you out there is probably a good decision to be made.
That's exactly right.
John, thank you, my friend. I appreciate it as always.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me again.
Of course. See ya. All right. Thanks again to John Smoltz for joining me. Honestly, really, really cool week on Flippin Bats this week. Again, I know I've said it a lot of times, but to grow up an Atlanta Braves fan and to have John Smoltz on every week is something I will never take for granted. And this week to have on John Smoltz and Tom Glavine is just the coolest thing in the world. And to get to go back and forth with them on telling stories about each other was just It was absolutely incredible. So I hope you all enjoyed it and enjoyed this entire week. Again, if you haven't listened yet, go back and listen to the Tom Glavine episode. If you enjoy stories of legends of the game, telling stories about other legends of the game, and you'll absolutely love it. But thank you all for listening to Saturday with Smoltz. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever. Just hit that follow, subscribe button. It does really help. And also follow us on all social media, including YouTube, at Flippin Bats Pod, where you can watch every single thing we do. But that does it for this Saturday with Smoltz episode. Enjoy the weekend, everyone. We will be back on Monday. But until then, peace.